I used to believe that a real harvest needed real ground. For years, I looked at my little run of pots on the patio and quietly told myself they were a cute hobby, nothing more, and that the serious food happened out in the raised beds where the soil was deep and the roots could run. Then, one dry summer, when my in-ground bed baked and struggled, the pots by my back door kept feeding me week after week, and I finally admitted I had it backwards the whole time. A container isn't a smaller garden. It's a garden you control completely, and that control is exactly why the right plants pour out more food per square foot than most people ever get from open soil. So this is the fourth part of my ongoing count of the vegetables that give back the most when you grow them in pots. And I've saved some of the best for this one. I'm going to walk you down from number 15 all the way to number 1, and for each one I'll tell you the pot size that finally worked, the watering rhythm, and the small mistake I made, so you don't have to. And stay with me to the very end, because my number 1 is the plant that quietly hands you 2 completely separate harvests from a single container, and almost nobody grows it that way. I didn't for years, and it cost me. Before we start, do me a small favor. Tell me in the comments what you're working with, just the basics. A balcony, a windowsill, a patio, or a yard, and roughly how much sun it gets. It helps me point you the right way, and honestly, I love seeing where all of you are growing. All right, let's ease into it. Let's begin at number 15 with bush beans, because this is the plant that taught me patience is sometimes the wrong instinct. I used to plant a handful of seeds, harvest once, feel proud, and let the plant sit there tired and finished. What I didn't understand is that a bush bean is built to keep giving, but only if you keep picking. Every pod you leave on the plant sends a signal that says the season is over, make seeds, slow down. Every pod you remove says the opposite, keep flowering, keep producing. The plant is literally racing to reproduce, and your harvest basket is what keeps it running. Bush beans are perfect for pots because they don't climb, they don't need a trellis, and their roots are shallow and content. I grow 6 to 8 plants in a single pot that holds around 5 gallons, filled with ordinary potting mix, and I water when the top inch feels dry, usually every day or two once the heat comes. They fix a little of their own nitrogen from the air with the help of bacteria on their roots, so they don't ask for much feeding. Here's the number that changed how I grow them. If you pick every 2 to 3 days, a single healthy plant will keep flowering for 3 to 4 weeks longer than one you harvest lazily. That's not a small bonus. That's doubling your season from the same soil. But if beans reward speed, the next one rewards the impatient gardener even more. At number 14, radishes, the crop I now use to cure my own restlessness. Early on, I'd sow something slow, then hover over the pot for weeks, wondering if anything was happening underground, and half the time I'd disturb the roots checking. Radishes fix that. From seed to harvest, many spring varieties are ready in just 22 to 30 days, which makes them one of the fastest vegetables you can grow. And that speed is a real advantage in a container, not just a novelty. Here's why they suit pots so beautifully. A radish is a small, quick root that hates competition and loves loose soil, and loose soil is exactly what a container gives you. In heavy garden ground, they often come out gnarled and forked, but in fluffy potting mix, they swell fast and round. I grow them in a wide, shallow container, only 6 to 8 inches deep, scatter the seeds, and thin them, so each one has about 2 inches of elbow room, because crowding is the single reason most people get all leaves and no root. Water steadily, Never let them dry out and swing back wet, or they'll split or turn sharp and hot. The real trick is to sow a small pinch every 2 weeks instead of all at once, so you're harvesting continuously instead of drowning in radishes for 1 week and having none the next. And once you've tasted that rhythm, the leafy crops start to make a lot more sense, which brings me to one I underestimated for years. Number 13 is Swiss chard, and I'm a little embarrassed by how long I ignored it. I thought of it as a plainer, less exciting cousin of spinach, something you grow if you're being sensible. Then I planted a few in a pot for color, those glowing stems of pink and gold and red, and that single container fed me leafy greens from late spring all the way into the cold, long after everything else had quit. Chard is what I call a cut and come again crop, and understanding that phrase is the whole secret. You don't harvest the plant, you harvest from the plant. You take the outer, older leaves from the base, snapping or cutting them cleanly, and you leave the small inner leaves at the center completely alone. That growing center is the engine, and as long as you protect it, it keeps pushing new leaves for months. A single plant can give you leaves for an entire season this way. It also shrugs off heat far better than spinach and tolerates a light frost, so it bridges the seasons where other greens fail. I grow chard in a pot at least 10 inches deep, 1 plant per container if I want it big, or a few crowded together if I'm harvesting them young and tender. It's not fussy about feeding, but a splash of diluted liquid feed every couple of weeks keeps those leaves coming thick. Water when the top inch dries. That's really all it asks. But if chard is the reliable workhorse of the leafy greens, the next one is the nutrient powerhouse that finally earned its spot on my patio. At number 12, kale, and here's the confession. I used to grow bitter kale and blame the plant. I'd taste those tough, sharp leaves and decide kale just wasn't for me. The plant was fine, my timing was wrong. Kale grown fast and cut young is mild and sweet, and kale that sits stressed and thirsty in summer heat turns bitter and leathery, and for years I was doing the second thing and expecting the first. Kale thrives in a container because you control the 2 things it cares about most: cool roots and steady water. I use a pot that holds at least 3 to 5 gallons per plant, and in hot weather I move it where it catches morning sun and afternoon shade, which keeps the leaves tender. Like chard, it's a cut and come again plant, so you take the lowest, oldest leaves and leave the crown to keep producing. Here's the part I love, and it's real. Kale actually gets sweeter after a light frost, because when the temperature drops, the plant converts some of its starches into sugars as a kind of natural antifreeze to protect its cells. So the container you thought was finished in autumn is quietly making the best tasting leaves of the whole year. Pick young, water consistently, feed lightly, and you'll wonder why you ever bought it in a bag. And speaking of greens that punish you for the smallest mistake in timing, let me tell you about the one that broke my heart the most. Number 11 is spinach, and this is the crop that taught me that fighting a plant's nature never works. I wanted spinach in summer, at the peak of the garden, alongside my tomatoes, so I kept sowing it into the heat, and it kept bolting, shooting up a flower stalk and turning bitter almost overnight, and I kept feeling like I was failing. I wasn't failing. I was ignoring the biology. Spinach is a cool season plant, and long summer days plus warmth are a direct signal that tells it to stop making leaves and rush to make seed. Once I stopped forcing it and started working with it, everything changed, and containers made that easy. I sow spinach in the cool shoulders of the year, early spring and again in late summer for a fall crop in a pot about 8 inches deep. The magic of a container here is mobility. When a surprise warm spell arrives, I simply slide the pot into shade or somewhere cooler, and I buy the plant another week or two of sweet, tender leaves before it wants to bolt. Keep the soil evenly moist, because dryness is another bolting trigger, and harvest the outer leaves often. A shallow, wide pot gives you far more spinach than a deep, narrow one, because spinach spreads out, not down. But if you want a green that never bolts, never quits, and grows in the tiniest sliver of space, the next one is almost unfair. At number 10, green onions, also called scallions, and this is the one that made me feel a little foolish for ever buying them, because here's the thing I discovered by accident. You can regrow them from the ones you already bought. The next time you use store-bought green onions, keep the white root ends, the bottom inch with the little hairy roots still attached, and push them into a pot of soil. Within days, they start growing back, and you can cut and cut and cut again. The reason this works is that all the energy and the growing points sit right at that base. So when you take the green tops, the plant simply pushes up more. It's the ultimate cut and come again crop, and it needs almost no root room, which is why a pot only 6 inches deep on a windowsill will keep a small household in green onions more or less permanently. I tuck them into the edges and gaps of my other containers where nothing else fits, and they ask for nothing but a drink when the surface dries and a little sun. It's the single cheapest, most forgiving thing I grow, and it quietly saves money every single week. And that idea of getting free plants from what you already have is exactly the kind of thing I want to pause on, because the next part is for everyone who thinks none of this applies to them. If you find yourself wanting all of this in one place, the pot sizes, the watering rhythms, the exact mistakes to avoid for every plant on this list, I've put everything together in a book called The Container Harvest, available through the link in the description. It's the complete guide I wish I'd had at the start, written for real spaces and real seasons, not ideal ones. You can find it at the link below for $97, and it covers far more ground than any single video can. Whether you're starting from zero or you've been growing for years, the Container Harvest was built to sit beside you through every season. Now, that idea of getting free plants from what you already have is exactly the kind of thing I want to pause on, because the next part is for everyone who thinks none of this applies to them. I know some of you watching have been gardening in the ground for decades, and part of you is thinking that container tips are for apartment dwellers, not for you. And I know others of you haven't planted a single thing yet and are afraid this is all too advanced. So this one, number 9, is for both of you, and it costs nothing to try this weekend. Bush cucumbers. Here's what I want you to take from this, no matter what you grow in. The reason a compact bush cucumber gives so much in a pot is airflow and warmth, and both of those are things you can give any plant anywhere today. In open ground, cucumbers sprawl across damp soil, and the leaves stay wet and catch disease. Lift that same plant into a container up off the ground, or even just prop and space your in-ground plants so air moves through them, and you cut disease pressure dramatically. If you have a big garden, the lesson is portable. Grow 1 cucumber in a pot by the kitchen door, and watch how much cleaner and more productive it is than the ones lost in the sprawl. If you're a nervous beginner, this is your permission to start with a single 10-gallon pot, a compact bush variety, a short stake, and nothing else. Cucumbers are heavy drinkers, so in high summer that pot may need water every single day, and that's normal, not a mistake. They're also hungry, so a liquid feed every week keeps them fruiting. And like the beans, the more you pick, the more you get, because one overripe cucumber left on the vine tells the plant to stop. Pick them young and firm, and they'll keep coming for weeks. See how none of this needed special equipment? Good. Because the next few are where containers truly start to outperform the ground. Number 8 is peppers. And this is where I have to admit my biggest wasted years, because I grew peppers in the ground in a cool climate and got a handful of small fruit and blamed my thumb. Peppers are tropical at heart. They come from warm places, and their roots want to be warm, and cold soil in spring stalls them for weeks. A container is the answer I wish I'd found sooner, because a dark pot in the sun warms up far faster than the open ground, and those warm roots translate directly into more flowers and more fruit. I grow one pepper plant in a pot that holds 3 to 5 gallons in full sun, and I resist the urge to overwater because peppers actually set fruit better with slightly restrained watering once they're established, not soaking wet feet. Here's a small piece of real plant science that saved my harvests. Peppers can drop their flowers when night temperatures swing too high or too low, so the mobility of a pot lets me pull them into a warmer, sheltered spot during a cold snap and keep the flowers on the plant. And a hidden bonus, if you can protect a pepper plant through winter indoors, it's actually a perennial, and a second-year plant fruits earlier and heavier than a first-year one. Most people throw that head start away every autumn. But if peppers reward warmth, the next one rewards it even more. And it's the plant most people ruin with the wrong pot. At number 7, tomatoes. And specifically the determinate bush or patio types, because this is the distinction that changed everything for me. For years, I grew sprawling, indeterminate tomatoes in pots that were far too small, watched them flop, dry out twice a day, and disappoint me, and I concluded that tomatoes just don't do well in containers. The truth was I was pairing the wrong tomato with the wrong pot. Determinate varieties grow to a set size, set their fruit over a concentrated window, and stay compact, which is exactly what a container wants. The number that matters most here is pot size, and it's the one people get wrong more than any other. A tomato in a container wants at least 5 gallons of soil, and 10 is better. In a study of container tomatoes, larger pots produce dramatically more fruit than cramped ones because a bigger volume of soil holds more water and more nutrients and buffers the roots against the wild swings that stress a plant and stop it fruiting. Water deeply and consistently, because erratic watering is what causes that ugly dark patch on the bottom of the fruit, a calcium problem triggered not by a lack of calcium, but by uneven water. Feed regularly once fruit sets. Give it full sun. Do that, and a single determinate plant in a good-sized pot will outproduce 3 struggling plants in tiny ones. But there's a leafy crop that beats even tomatoes for sheer harvest per pot, and it's the one you can cut over and over. Number 6 is leaf lettuce. And this is the plant that finally made me understand the true meaning of cut and come again, the phrase I keep returning to because it's the secret behind so much container abundance. I used to grow whole lettuces, wait for a head, cut it, and have an empty pot. Then I learned to grow loose leaf types and harvest only the outer leaves, and suddenly one pot fed me salads for 2 months instead of one meal. Lettuce is shallow-rooted and quick, which makes it ideal for wide, shallow containers, even window boxes, only 6 inches deep. Because you're taking the outer leaves and leaving the center to regrow, a single sowing keeps producing for weeks, and the plant stays productive as long as it stays cool and watered. Heat is the enemy again. It triggers bolting and bitterness. So I keep lettuce in morning sun and afternoon shade through warm spells, and I sow a fresh pinch every couple of weeks. Here's the quiet math that stunned me. A wide pot of loose leaf lettuce, harvested outer leaf by outer leaf, will give you several times the total weight of greens that one head of lettuce ever could from the same space and the same water. That's not gardening harder. That's gardening smarter. And smarter is exactly the theme as we climb higher, because the next one gives you a mountain of food from a plant most people think needs a field. At number 5, summer squash and zucchini in the bush varieties. And this is where I have to laugh at my old self, because I once planted 3 zucchini and drowned my whole street in them. The lesson wasn't that zucchini fails in pots. It's the opposite. It succeeds so well that one plant is usually enough, and that's the point. Extraordinary yield from a single container. A bush zucchini has a compact form but a big appetite, so it needs a large pot, at least 10 gallons, full sun, deep water, and steady feeding. The reason it does so well in a container is the same warmth and drainage advantage the cucumber enjoys, plus you can position it where pollinators find it easily. And that's the one thing to watch, pollination, because squash have separate male and female flowers. And if the early fruit shrivels, it's usually because a female flower wasn't pollinated, not because anything is wrong. If your space is short on bees, you can hand pollinate in seconds with a small brush or by touching one flower to another, and you'll never lose a fruit to bad luck again. Harvest them small and often, because a zucchini left to grow into a giant club tells the plant to slow down. Keep picking, and one plant can hand you fruit for the better part of a summer. But if you want the highest yield per square inch of soil in this entire list, you have to grow up, not out. Number 4 is pole beans. And yes, I already gave you bush beans, but this is the payoff for anyone short on floor space, because pole beans taught me to stop thinking about area and start thinking about volume. A bush bean uses the footprint of the pot. A pole bean uses the air above it. Give it something to climb, and it turns a single square foot of soil into a tall green wall of pods. The science here is simple and generous. A climbing bean keeps flowering and fruiting all the way up the vine for as long as you keep picking. So instead of the concentrated flush of a bush type, you get a long, steady stream that can run for 2 months or more. I grow them in a pot at least 12 inches deep with a few tall stakes or a simple trellis lashed together, and I let them find their own way up. Like all beans, they feed themselves a little through nitrogen fixation, so they don't demand rich soil, just steady water and regular picking. A narrow balcony where floor space is precious is exactly where pole beans shine, because they ask for almost no ground and repay you vertically. But now we reach the 3 that surprised me most. And this next one grows entirely hidden, out of sight. At number 3, potatoes. And this is the crop that felt like magic the first time I did it, because I'd always assumed potatoes needed a field and a lot of digging. In a container, you plant a few seed potatoes in the bottom third of a large pot or a sturdy grow bag, cover them, and as the shoots rise, you add more soil around the stems, a process called hilling, which encourages the plant to form more tubers along the buried stem. The container advantage here is enormous, and it's mostly about the harvest, because instead of digging and slicing through your crop with a fork the way I did for years in the ground, you simply tip the whole bag over and pour the potatoes out clean. A grow bag of 10 to 15 gallons will give you a genuine meal's worth of potatoes from a single bag, and you can line up several in a space no lawnmower could reach. They want full sun, consistent water, and loose soil that drains. because sitting wet will rot the tubers. One honest caution: only ever plant certified seed potatoes, not shriveled ones from the back of the cupboard, because those can carry disease into your soil. Grow them this way once, and you'll never see a bag of potatoes the same way again. But for the pure ratio of value to effort, the next one is almost absurd. Number 2 is garlic, and this is the plant that quietly embarrassed me because for years I bought head after head at the store, while a single clove in a pot would have started the whole cycle for free. You break a bulb into cloves, push each one pointy end up into the soil in autumn, and then, remarkably, you mostly walk away. Garlic does its slow, patient work through the cold months when almost nothing else is growing, using space and time that would otherwise sit empty. The container works beautifully because garlic wants good drainage above all, and it hates sitting in the cold, soggy soil that so many garden beds become over winter. A pot drains freely and keeps the cloves healthy. Plant cloves about 4 to 6 inches apart in a pot, at least 8 inches deep, water occasionally through the cold season, and let the cold itself do something essential, because garlic actually needs a period of cold to trigger it to form a proper bulb, rather than staying a single round clove. That's why fall planting matters. In late spring, the hardneck types send up a curling flower stalk called a scape, and if you snip those scapes off, the plant pushes that energy down into a bigger bulb, and you get to eat the scapes too. A delicious bonus harvest most people never taste. Nearly free, nearly hands-off, and it uses your off-season. And that idea of getting more than one harvest from a single planting is exactly what makes my number 1 so special, because it does it better than anything else I grow. So here we are at number 1, and I want to tell you honestly that I ignored this plant for most of my growing life, because I only understood half of what it could do. Number 1 is the sweet potato. And the reason it tops this whole list is that a single container hands you 2 entirely different harvests, and almost nobody realizes it. Here's the half I was missing for years.
Everyone knows the sweet potato makes those sweet tubers underground, and it does, and it loves a container for it, because sweet potatoes are tropical and thrive in the warm, confined,
well-drained soil of a big pot or grow bag of 15 to 20 gallons. You start them from a slip, a rooted shoot. Plant 1 or 2 per large bag in full sun, keep them warm and watered, and at the end of the season you tip out a cluster of tubers. That alone would earn it a place. But that's not the secret. The secret is the leaves. Sweet potato leaves, the young shoots and tender foliage that vine out all summer, are one of the most widely eaten leafy greens across much of Asia and Africa, and they are genuinely nutritious, rich in antioxidants and vitamins, and completely edible, cooked like spinach.
So all summer long, while the tubers are quietly growing underground, you can be harvesting the vigorous young leaves off the top. And because the plant is such an enthusiastic grower,
taking those shoots barely slows it down. It's cut and come again, and a root crop in the same pot. 1 planting, 1 container, greens all season, and a harvest of tubers at the end. When I finally understood that, I stopped seeing a novelty and started seeing the single most productive thing on my patio. It loves the heat that stalls other plants. It drapes beautifully over the edge of a pot, and it asks for little more than sun, warmth, and water. That was the belief that took me longest to break, that a plant only gives you one thing, and the sweet potato is the one that broke it for good. When I look back at all the seasons I wasted believing I needed more ground, more tools, more space, I realized the whole thing came down to a single shift. Growing well was never about size. It was about choosing the right plants and giving them the small handful of things they actually want. Warm roots, steady water, room to breathe, and a hand that harvests often. Consistency, not perfection. A few well-chosen pots, tended gently, really will outproduce a big neglected patch. And I've lived both sides of that now. If you're the kind of person who would rather grow real food simply in whatever space you've got than overspend and overwork for it, then you already understand the quiet heart of all of this. So tell me down in the comments what you're growing in and how much sun it gets. A balcony, a windowsill, a patio, a yard, just a line, because I read them and I plan future videos around what you tell me. Please actually leave that comment, even just a few words. It genuinely helps me help you. And if this is the kind of gardening you want more of, calm, honest, and focused on growing more with less, come along with me, because in the next part, I'm going to show you the one root vegetable I swore would never work in a pot, and the simple change that finally proved me wrong. Until then, keep it simple and keep growing. I hope this one helped you. If you're still with me, here's what's next. Inside the small plot circle, I show you the full 2-harvest container method, the part this video only touched. You can ask me your own question, and I answer you myself. No bots. You're in good company here. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen, and you can cancel any time with one click. Now that you know which vegetables give the most, let me show you how to double that harvest. 10 simple tips to get far more from every pot. It's starting right here, so stay with me.